Maybe you're just not likable. Not you, Ebony, but the rest of y'all. Ba-dum-bum. Maybe you.
Associations, let it be known. Um, it is Thursday. It is debate day. Debate night is tonight. And we got the one and only Lauren Burke joining us. And at some point, we're expecting Katia Woods to also join us this morning. But before we get to our really sore point of the morning, and there's Katia. Lauren, you and I had a brief discussion before we went live about the position that progressives find themselves in. Um, it's not looking too good. What do you see, Lauren, that's going on here with why these progressives and most of them are young lawmakers? What's happening?
What's happening is that corporate Democrats don't care about Democrats that talk too much about issues of poverty and the Green New Deal and universal health care. They don't care about that. And those people really speak up when there's some deal made with people like Joe Manchin, which is what happened with Build Back Better. And when they start to really push for what they want on the progressive left, they're seen as a nuisance. They're not seen as, oh, okay, well, they have constituents that over index in poverty and they should stand up for those constituents in St. Louis and the Bronx and in some of Lee's case, parts of Pittsburgh. They're seen as a nuisance. And frankly, I think the Democrats don't want to have people like Jamal Bowman around. They don't want to have people like Nina Turner around, which is what we saw. We saw an effort against her from the Democratic Party, not the Republican Party, the Democratic Party.
Yes.
So when AIPAC shows up and everybody talks about how much of their money is coming from the Republican side, nobody cares. Nobody stood up for Jamal Bowman other than Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who came to campaign with him. Everybody else was dead silent. And just incidentally, I was born in AOC's district, the district right next door to Jamal Bowman in the Bronx. And it's been over indexed for poverty forever. So that's why Richie Torres, sitting there in the poorest district in the country, can run his mouth all day about foreign policy with a 90% black and brown district, and nobody says anything. It's just sort of normal behavior. I find that to be ridiculous. But the bottom line of it is that, that progressive left has a hard time in a very corporatized Democratic Party.
Yeah. Katia, I saw you were at the front lines of tweeting out yesterday and expressing righteous outrage at CNN. CNN, for those who may not have caught it, they sent out over 800 credentials to media and excluded Black-owned media from tonight's debate. The Biden-Harris administration, their campaign, I should say, is holding a special meeting this afternoon in Atlanta with Black-owned media only. Um, the campaign, of course, has been reaching out to Black media, and both campaigns, Katia, this is the other part of the situation with this. Both campaigns have been pressing hard, trying to get Black support. This debate is in Atlanta, a predominantly Black city with a Black mayor. The Atlanta Voice is down the street from CNN, literally. The Daily World. I mean, you have Rolling out there. And heck, let's be real. You don't give Roland Martin a credential. Katia, what's up with that?
I mean, the people who control these things don't look like us. And I mean, that's as easy as it goes. So when you don't look like us, right, you don't have anybody that looks like us, comes from our community in these spaces to say, oh, hold up, this is not a good look, period. You know what I mean? And when you don't have that and no one has the self-awareness to have that, like I was reading, preparing for today, I was reading stuff and I'm like, they're like, well, you didn't meet the deadline. No, they knew this. We all knew the dates from the debate, right? And media outlets, when you want to cover something, you don't get an invite, you start making inquiries. You start saying, hey, who do I send? Who do I do this? And who do I do that? And they did that, and they never got a response. In one of the articles, I believe it was the Atlanta Voice, but they did a query through their email, and not one response, nothing from CNN. And CNN is like, well, you missed a deadline. Well, how can you make a deadline when you don't know whom and where to, and reach out to? And why do you have more foreign media when those folks, I understand it's the United States, but those folks, that audience can't vote here. Majority of these people are not voting here. So it's just a bunch of nonsense. I also want to point out, not to say that the Biden-Harris campaign is perfect, but they're at least trying to do something. The other guy's been in every nook and alleged black space, their campaign has done nothing, but they're supposedly care. They're supposedly, interested in our vote, but they've been quiet on this. Do you know what I mean? And also, why is it we always have to have something creative for us instead of being in the room? CNN needs to do better. CNN, the right thing would be like, hey guys, we've made room for 10 journalists, 10 outlets, and bump those foreign journalists to the viewing room.
Well, the bottom line too, CNN does need to do better, but 800 plus, and that's what got me in an email from Amy Sanders. She says this to me. She says, "Hi, Stacey. I just read your piece about the upcoming CNN debate and wanted to send you our statement." And then she, look, she says unattributed for inclusion in your piece. No, we're not doing that, Amy. She says we are happy to welcome more than 800 journalists from around the world to Atlanta this week to cover the CNN presidential debate. And it would stop there because, like you said, 800 journalists. You have the nerve to send that to me when you did not invite any black media at all. And as you articulated, there was no invite. They're claiming that they put something out in the public a month ago. We never saw it. Why is it that all these black media outlets never saw this? And why haven't you made space for that? They sent me an email last week. Now, I will tell you this, a very, very influential person told me, I want you to reapply for the credential, and I want you to CC me. This is a very, very I cannot say who it is. They want to remain anonymous. And I CC'd that individual so that they could, because they wanted to see what response would come back. And that response was from a guy named Dylan Rose. And Dylan Rose goes on to say that our deadline was June 7th. We've had many requests, but we can't accommodate you. But it's the same stuff, Lauren. As Terry Sanders writes in Black News, for over 197 years, and we cannot get an invite. That is trash. That is absolute trash.
Well, and even worse, it's in Atlanta. It's in Atlanta, the Black Mecca. It's not in South Dakota. It's not in Idaho. The debate is in Atlanta, which means that you have some black press there. Obviously, the Atlanta Black Star and the Atlanta Voice is sitting there. And incidentally, Roland Martin mentioned last night that he actually did not apply for a credential. I didn't hear whether or not he knew about the June 7 deadline, but all of this is a result of the debate commission not being in existence and CNN being in charge of the debate. That was problem number one. So now you have a bunch of, frankly, white executives at CNN, whether they be in the PR room or in the corner office, making decisions about who's going to come to the debate. But back to your stat, Stacey, 800 credentials. If you had told me, if somebody had asked me how many credentials were given out for the debate, I would not have guessed 800.
No,
Okay?
I would have
Right.
guessed maybe a dozen or two.
Right. I would have said maybe 200, but not 800.
No, I wouldn't even gone there because they closed this. It's closed, right? There's no audience.
Right.
There, so they really wanted to get a hand because of the former president's behavior.
Right.
They wanted to make sure that they had a handle on this.
But I do like the fact that I think it was the Atlanta Voice that pointed out, or Atlanta Black Star pointed out that foreign press was given credentials. The other thing that is so funny is that a lot of times what happens, and I guarantee you it's happening in this case, one news organization usually gets multiple credentials in a lot of cases. So I suspect MSNBC, for example, probably has 20, so you can't give one to the Atlanta Voice or Atlanta Black Star, but you give 20 to MSNBC,
Right.
or something. I guarantee you that's happening.
Sort of how the White House Correspondents Association dinner works.
Right.
You give 5 tables to an MSNBC or
Right.
CNN, or 10 tables to CNN, and you give 2 seats, not a table, 2 seats to the Black press.
Right, exactly. And so, it is a great example of how, if we count the Black-owned news organizations, we know that Black news is it's under 5% of all news. But once you put the foreign news organizations in there, this really gets to be an interesting discussion, because what CNN, of course, has done is decided that the foreign press is more important than the press in the United States, in Atlanta, a very Black city, in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And so they credential foreign press. So that for me was a crazy moment in this. But it makes you wonder, did the Griot apply? Did Capital Black apply? And they probably didn't know about it, because this is all an inside job. This is the club of white journalists in these organizations that all know each other.
And make no mistake, they will point out and guarantee you, if journalists are shown on CNN's cameras tonight, they will make sure to point out the couple of Blacks in the room. That's for sure. This is what they do, right, Katia?
They don't work. I mean, listen, this is a problem in the industry in every nook and cranny. Also, some of this is us, though. I will say that it's like we need to speak out more, right? We can't just be reactionary when stuff goes bad, right? We don't team up together to talk about the disparities in the community and what we face as Black journalists, the sarcasm. I mean, I was just at a blackety event,
wow.
in Miami, and the PR team is not Black. There's no one on the staff on the PR team that's Black. They don't know who we are. They're mixing in, they don't even know how to run a press line. They're mixing in bloggers, whoever, podcasters with journalists. And, I'm too old. I don't do mess. If you're not going to be organized, bye. I'm still going to do what I need to do. But at the end of the day, some of this is, we have to speak out more. We have to be proactive. We have to say, hey, we know these debates are about to come up. We know we're about to have this campaign trail, right? From primaries to local races and everything. We need to put the horn. Hey, are your people getting credentialed? Are your people getting what they need? Because it's not just the top. It is the House of Representatives. It's local elections. The list goes on and on. This happens at every level where people are like, well, we can sit you over here. No, the actions happen
in the back.
Yeah.
The kitchen.
We see this when it comes to important court hearings and things like that. And, and also I will say that the Biden-Harris campaign, I have seen their money being spent on Black radio. I've seen it in those spaces. Again, the other guy claims he cares about us, but where's the ad revenue? And he has the money, we know he's using it for other stuff, but the point is the money's being raised. So I do think, not to say that CNN is justified in what they're doing, but we need to band together better, and I don't mean just at NABJ or whatever convention where we claim we're going to do better and then we go out and go back to, fighting each other. I said it yesterday. I said the way the system is set up, and we fall for it all the time, is we are left with the crumbs, right? And then we fight each other like it's the Hunger Games for the 2 little crumbs, instead of all being together. Either we all get what we're supposed to get, or we're not doing it.
Well, you mentioned the CBC. The CBC did come out strongly worded statement, led by Congressman Gregory Meeks, who is with the CBC. He's the chair of the CBC PAC. And he says, this afternoon, we learned that CNN has credentialed 800 members of the media for the first presidential debate of the election cycle. Not one represents a Black-owned media outlet. CNN's exclusion of Black-owned media represents an egregious oversight and is totally unacceptable. Representative Meeks goes on to say that CNN must immediately credential Black-owned media outlets ahead of tonight's debate. Failure to do so is a choice, an offense to Black Americans, and we cannot stand for it. We are calling on CNN to credential a minimum of 10 Black-owned media outlets for the debate. Black-owned media provides a critical, trusted source of information to our communities, and their role in our democracy must be respected and honored by CNN. That was Representative Gregory Meeks, Lauren.
No, that was I was actually surprised at his speed of getting that out.
Yeah,
Obviously
me too.
got the story really quickly, so that was really good. This points to like a few things. One, it's good that the Biden campaign is providing some sort of an exclusive opportunity to Black media, and hopefully they can use that to hit an exclusive story, right? So if they get that exclusive, whatever that is, whether it's Vice President Harris or the president or whatever that's going to be, whatever Black media shows up needs to really bang that out as a huge exclusive. The other thing is, isn't it interesting how so much of this campaign and some of these stories we see in the Washington Post and Politico are about Black voters, whether or not male Black voters are supporting Trump, this and that. You can bet there'll be some little section tonight where Dana Bash and Jake Tapper will ask the Black question. The Saturday, I don't know whether you guys have seen the Saturday Night Live skit, the Black question, but they'll have the Black questions, but there'll be nobody Black in the discussion. That's really sort of, to me, one of the specialties of big media, and really CNN in particular. They have this sort of tendency to want to talk about Black people all the time with no Black people in the discussion. Now, finally, they do have some anchors on the air that will do that, but it had gone for a long time where we want to talk about Black folks, but we don't actually want any Black people in the discussion. And that really should be people like Cornell Belcher and Hit Strategies, and the other pollster, Mondale Robinson, should be in a lot of these discussions. And so it really is reflecting, again, a greater problem in the industry, which has been going on for a long time, which is they want to control the image of things. They want to control the narrative. They want to control what we talk about and don't talk about. And without Black people in the room, they get to do that. So, but watch, the next embarrassment is going to be that CNN's ratings are going to probably come in third. I suspect Fox will be number one, MSNBC will be number two for the debate, and CNN, which is hosting the debates, but it's simulcasting on everybody else's channel, I guarantee you they come in third. And it's stuff like this that kind of makes that happen.
Well, I think Power 96 totally agrees with you, because he says, I'm sorry, but who watches CNN? And he also made a point. This happened, Katia, in 2016. That his point is that Donald Trump has free advertising from CNN, ABC, CBS, and NBC. And I'm sure what he means by that is what happened in 2016, that they continue. It was Trump, all the time. And I contend that that's what gave birth to his saying fake news, because once they realized that, oh, wait a minute, this guy, he could win, they turned on him. They started telling the truth really about him, and he kept saying fake news. But
yeah, it's also important.
Go ahead,
call it out. I mean, it's important to call it out. And I think the important thing, especially of having Black media on there, is to point out how having this man in office, from reproductive rights from women, from having gotten rid of affirmative action, how that is affecting us. It was helping us a little bit, but it wasn't, you know what I mean? Now, if you thought things were really interesting at your job, or getting into certain educational institutions, who think that the only reason you got in is because of the color of your skin, not because you truly have the resume. It's already been murky out here in this job market. So, for people to understand, also certain federal funding, we're looking at the lower half states, once again, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, the West Virginians out here operating like they're New York and California in terms of revenue, but they're not turning down, and including Texas, turning down, you have a considerable amount of people living below the poverty line, and the federal government is going, here's some money so kids can have lunches in the summertime, and they're going, oh no, we don't take handouts. But these people are supposedly pro-life. You can't be pro-life if you don't want to feed kids that are living below the poverty line. And we're not talking about an old country buffet. We're talking about a sandwich and maybe a bag of chips and a drink. So these are the things that, Black people have to be aware of. Same thing with Medicaid, healthcare. We know after the pandemic, huge issue for our people. It affected us way harder than our counterparts, but they don't want to have or get the money for you to have proper medical care. Healthcare is not a luxury. So this is why it's important for Black media to make the case to say, before you go in there and vote for the guy that claims, the other side hasn't done for you, look at the voting record of your representatives, the people in city council, school board. We all know how important school board is because people are trying to people are banning books, forget trying. So it's really important for us to have our voice in these rooms to make the case.
Yeah, and, Lauren, in addition to what Katia just articulated, can you just bottom line for us why this is such an egregious
Well,
oversight, or whatever you want, if you want to call it an oversight, but why it's so important that we are in that room?
Well, because what was just stated was perfect. So obviously racism is on the ballot, and it's been on the ballot the whole time because the whole construct of this election really starts with the presidency of the first Black president in history, Barack Obama, in 2008. Then we got the backlash of that in Donald Trump 8 years later. I mean, he literally stated at one point he ran because of Barack Obama. I mean,
Yes,
he's been
he
so
did.
motivated by the first Black president. And now that, of course, is twirled into this whole discussion. To say that racism isn't on the ballot would be an understatement. It's twirled into this discussion about DEI, the historic repeal by the Supreme Court of affirmative action, the pushback on American history, the taking books off the shelf that have dealt with some of that history that are deemed, as the governor of Virginia would say, as a divisive concept. And he's going to appear with Donald Trump, by the way, tomorrow in Chesapeake, Virginia. Obviously, the Black Lives Matter agenda was pushed back on by the Republican Party and others, and some in the Democratic Party, quite frankly. So racism and race is a big issue and a big topic in this country and always has been. And so to have no Black reporters in the room when you've given out 800 credentials make no sense. You would think that they would have gone down the list at CNN and said, wow, we have no Black-owned media credential for this debate. Let's find somebody that's
Let's
out
find
there.
somebody, right? I got one Black friend.
Right. And so that for me, and again, so we'll have Dana Bash and Jake Tapper discussing, I suspect, some of the issues I just listed, but no one Black, of course, in the room. Forget about in the conversation, in the room. And, I recognize, of course, that Laura Coates and Abby Phillip and Victor Blackwell are around at CNN and probably will be on the scene. I suspect they will be. Let's see where they anchor from tonight. They might all be at the same desk talking about the debate, whatever. But the point is, it is amazing, who controls that narrative of these stories, who emphasizes what issues is the whole ball game in the media. All right. Who talks about what is the whole ball game.
And here's the other thing. We're talking about Atlanta and where the debate is and what, like you said, it's like one of the certainly predominantly Black city. Right. And yesterday, Mike V had mentioned this, and I want to mention it here because it happened in Atlanta. One of the co-founders of the venture capital firm, Fearless Fund, that supports women of color, has decided to step down as the chief operating officer at the company because the lawsuits that are stopping what they have been trying to do. Ayanna Parsons, she confirmed that, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. But she says she remains steadfast in her support of the Fearless Fund. This goes to what you both have been speaking to. This is a very, very, it's a Black issue. It's a major Black issue that the so-called conservatives have taken through the courts saying, hey, you can't give money only to Black women.
But here's the thing is, right? we also got to be strategic. Not that we want to join the little country clubs, but then be like, well, then you can't have your little country clubs. You can't have your little spaces where you don't allow women, where you don't allow members of color that you still have. Do you know what I mean? Or corporations should not be allowed to support places like that. You know, we still, we're looking at you, the PGA, and the list goes on, right? And this is the part that's so frustrating is, and at this particular point, it's not our job to point it out anymore, but we've been saying this to white women. You all are now having fits because you can't get, you know, you're being forced to miscarriage. You're being forced to do certain things. And we've been trying to tell you, ding dong, hello, this wasn't a black and white thing. You voted alongside your husband, and now you don't have autonomy of your body. They're talking about taking away a no contest divorce option for women so that you now have to prove that you're being abused or, you know, some type of form in order for you to legally separate and get some type of support from your spouse. They are literally trying to take us back. Forget the 1900s. We're talking about the 1800s. And again, there is allegedly rumors that if Trump wins, that that some of the Supreme Court justices that are older are going to step down so he can
Yes.
replace them. So it's like, hello.
I think Alito's wife pretty much confirmed that.
Exactly. I mean, are you not seeing, like, what more do you need? And I get it, Black people. Majority of you are conservative. I get it with the courts and everything. But we just had Reggie Jackson talk about what he went through. And that man is not 110 years old. He's 78. Our parents went through this.
Wait, Reggie Jackson's not 78. He can't be. Lauren, Reggie's 78?
Yeah, I think he is. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
He's 78, and he talked about what he went through. That was 67. So all these people that are like, oh, this happened 100. No, it didn't. Our parents and our grandparents are still alive to talk about it. And some of y'all are having fits because you can't get into the Gucci store. Imagine not being able to go, you know, to go into all these other places that you enjoy going to. No Morton Steakhouse, no, you know, Four Seasons, no private jets, whatever it is, you know, no going to, you know, those clubs in Vegas and being VIP. And I know I'm talking about superfluous things, but, you know, these are things that people are saying we don't, or look at all the gated communities that you are living in, you know, none of that, because they really say that.
Yeah, and here's a couple of things, Lauren. Number one, Power 96 mentions this. He says the first 5 minutes of those news networks is all about Trump, and none of them is calling him a 34-time convicted felon. You rarely see that call out. We make sure that we highlight this is the resume. This is his resume. But the other thing, and the Biden-Harris campaign is now, they have announced a brand new ad campaign in which they're going to, from here through the election, and they should highlight Project 2025. Lauren, speak to we've talked about Project 2025, and it seems that not enough folks are talking about it.
Yeah. Well, I think, you're right. Not enough folks are talking about it. I think Roland Martin is planning a special on Project 2025. Well, basically, that's the plan that Trump has, really effectively to dismantle the federal government as we know it, which, of course, would disproportionately impact a bunch of African Americans. The media is corporatized. It is just corporatized. And there's certain discussions that they are not going to have in a very blunt way, although I don't understand why you can't just state basic facts with regard to his now criminal record. I mean, that's just an obvious one. But
why not?
Donald Trump always seems to get a pass on so many things. And some of that is just the history in our country of white males being treated differently and with deference, with a certain amount of deference that other groups do not get. And bringing up things like white women voting in majority for Donald Trump in 2016, I think it was like 53%. And then having Dobbs happen a few years later is like something that is a fact that almost never seems to come up. But that's what I think the Black press is pretty good at, it, which is, you know, presenting a narrative from a slightly different perspective that is not emphasized on other media. And, it is interesting to think about the diversification in the Black press and in the press in general. Apparently, the Shade Room did apply for credentials for the debate and was denied.
I'm
I
sorry.
thought that was interesting. I don't know about Capital B or the Breakfast Club or any of those folks. Breakfast Club is typically not a entity that goes to cover things, right? So there's that. And I do think that there are a lot of folks, and the media has become extremely partisan again, like it did in the era of yellow journalism, where we have the Daily Caller and the Daily Signal and all of these, Fox News, all these right wing. We have that on the left as well. And so everyone acknowledges all of that. It will be interesting to see what the Trump campaign does. I mean, I have a news organization I own called Black Virginia News, and I have someone going to cover the Trump rally tomorrow in Chesapeake.
Okay.
And in filling out all the stuff, we're seeing that, it's the typical forms, what you can't bring and what you can bring. They've already said yes to my person. So it's interesting. The Biden campaign is doing a good job at trying to react to the fact that Black media was blocked out of the debate. Let's see what the Trump campaign does. They may do something, like they might,
Well,
who knows?
what they
Right?
what they continue to do is have a conversation in the barbershop with
I know.
pick up the stray Black folks who
Uh-huh.
probably buy them a drink or two
Mhm.
and give them some weed and have them say whatever with
Yeah,
Byron
that
Donalds
was a
leading.
mess. We got to stop letting people come into a space, by the way, whether it's Biden or Trump, come into a space and control the conversation. Like
Right.
someone's got to ask questions. So Trump wanting to talk about mugshots for 5 minutes is not what this got to be. You got to have somebody there. That's why the Black press is so important. You got to have somebody asking questions.
Real, and I want to be once again. I know I tweet this out all the time. Journalists, not Black media. This is why I don't know who needs to hear this, family, but the Shade Room is not journalism. When you don't leave the office and go out into the world to follow up on stories, to interview people, to be amongst the living, when you desperately, when your number one, contributor in terms of advertising is Fashion Nova, and no shade to them, you fit in where you can get in. That tells you all you need to know. I need us to do better. Like, what is happening, right? Like, we don't look at Sports Illustrated and want to know what's going on in the Middle East. No, we're going to Sports Illustrated to find out sports. So why are we going to the Shade Room to get an insight to this very important election?
Well, I get that sentiment. It's a sentiment that I have as well when I see these sort of outfits that sort of show up and declare themselves as journalists. But the reality of it is, I think it's a hard reality to face, is that the First Amendment effectively dictates that anyone who shows up and declares themselves a journalist is a journalist, whether that is a person with a camera phone or a person tethered to a company that is a formal news organization. And that might sound crazy, but if you actually look at the journalistic landscape, that is the reality under the law. We just saw it with Julian Assange's case being a perfect example. He declared himself a journalist the minute that the documents went out, because that protected him. And effectively, with our technology, anyone can wake up in the morning and declare themselves as such, even though I may not like that with regard to certain outfits that sort of just show up and do whatever, and then, they're asking for credentials. Under the law, that effectively is the truth, again, as much as I might not like it.
I mean, I hear you, but here's the problem, right? If you're going to do it, and this is not play time, we're not covering Coachella, right? I mean, this is our future, our children's future. This is your future. If you're going to then apply for these credentials, Shade Room, whatever else you have there, right? Then stop playing games. And even I can't even believe I'm saying this, but even TMZ is building a news division and hiring journalists that are willing to do the work. Yes, it's under the TMZ banner, but if you're going to do it, then don't cosplay at it, Shade Room. Then go and hire people and use your platform for effective good, to educate those people, for whatever reason don't have anybody in their surroundings to say, hey, here's some alternatives to the Shade Room where you can get good reporting. They break down the facts where it makes it palatable for you. That's my other issue. If you're going to be in this space, then be in the space and be responsible. Don't just do it for Instagram likes and clicks and kikis and whatever else you have there. That's the other issue. You're 100% correct. You can call yourself a journalist, but there are a lot of independent journalists who are using their voice to educate people. They're not cosplaying like the Shade Room.
Well, they're going to be, it's unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about it. As Lauren articulated, that's what people are doing. But I also think that there are people behind those people in most cases.
100%.
Look at Simon Atiba, for instance, and what is his mission in life, really? But having said that, Simon, much to our chagrin, just got another seat in the briefing room. It was a seat that opened up that we had applied for. Ashley Fields really worked her butt off to get that seat for the Black press, and we were shut out once again. And that seat now is Simon's for at least 2 years. So that's a problem too, that we don't have a seat there as well. So the seat at the table, we're gonna have to make our own table. How about that, Lauren?
I mean, surprise, white news organizations like to hire journalists that don't really speak directly to the concerns and needs of the Black community. What a shock, right? So I would argue that Simon Atiba is not alone. I mean, Mike Freeman over at the USA Today is unbelievable in terms of not having the narrative that, I mean, he seems to have been hired to attack other Black people, right? I mean, that's really what his primary function sometimes is. But you have to understand, like, everybody that builds any sort of media organization, any sort of platform of communication gets to decide what the narrative of that platform of communication is, whether it's Black Press USA or the Shade Room or Essence Magazine or Black Enterprise or anybody else. And again, I might not like it, but I do feel that one of the things that you're seeing is people, these news organizations, the Shade Room is not an accident. They are getting traffic. And so is the Breakfast Club that gets a lot of criticism, but that reflects where the people are and where they are going for information. Whether we like it or not, that is the truth. And we have to be strategic about figuring out how to get that audience to pay attention to something that we might say is more serious. I actually think that Charlemagne does a pretty good job at mixing in the serious and the entertainment. He's an entertainer, so I wasn't expecting him to show up with something that was serious facing, like Walter Cronkite. So he's doing something that basically it's kind of a carrot stick type of thing of, I'm doing entertainment, we're talking about entertainers, and then, oh, by the way, we're talking about something serious or interviewing a presidential candidate. And I think, frankly, that is where the audience, whether we like it or not, that is where the audience is at. And we have to be smart and strategic about how we leverage and how we deliver information to the grassroots. It's the grassroots that is really the important piece, not the people who are in the boule. No offense against the boule, but not the people in the boule, not the folks that went and have a JD from Columbia and all that, because that's the group making the decisions. And that the fact that that group is making decisions, they think that people like them want to see a certain type of news. But the truth is, it's the grassroots that drives a lot of this traffic. So that's another complicating factor in the Black community.
But we also have to, here's the thing, is we know that the money is behind the foolery and cocoonery, as I like to say, right? But we also, it's a bigger problem in our community, right? We have, it's from things not being taught at a level, like I'm always like saying, did we not all take social studies? Like, what is being taught in 5th, 6th grade social studies that we don't know the different roles of the government, right? That we don't know that, Joe Biden isn't responsible for the pothole down the street from you. That is not Joe Biden's problem, nor should it be, right? We don't know who does what, that we don't know our congressperson's name. We don't know who our 2 senators are, right? Or even the fact that we have 2 senators per state, right? Or that there are 50 states. Like, we all see the little street reporting, and it's funny, but it's also sad at the same time that we don't know what stands on our flag. So I do often wonder, I'm like, okay, some of it is media outreach, but some of it is also, starts in the home, right? Why do I know this? Because we discussed it at the dinner table. We discussed current news at the dinner table. My parents were like, you're going to read the newspaper. You're going to have a summer reading list. Those aren't necessarily white people things. Those aren't necessarily government things. And if you raise young people that aren't informed or encourage them to be informed, this is what you have. You have adults who are going to these outlets, not for entertainment, as you stated, but for, news information. And I think we have to take a little bit of responsibility in saying, are we preparing our children for the world that we live in? Like, if you ask the average kid in the summer, again, how many books are you reading? And that is on the parents. Because again, when we were kids, we were told, you want to go outside? I'm going to need you to read these 4 chapters, right? At the dinner table, you have to come bring with something to the discussion. That meant you read a newspaper. So I think a lot of this is we have to ask ourselves, when did we become comfortable in being ignorant?
We know the answer
Don,
to that. There's a complicating factor there, which of course is there is no town hall like there was when I was growing up and everybody was watching the same thing on television. Now the town hall is really running through TikTok, X, Facebook, and Instagram. So that now that things like, and again, the Shade Room is a great example of this, where they are able to platform information to a certain group of people. And this happens, of course, in Black media and white media, without the controls and the constructs of information that we used to have, and the business factors behind that and who makes the money is what drives the conversation about what gets on and what doesn't get on. These are complicating factors that, frankly, if you read the book, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, he gets into the fact that the first generation of kids, which is Generation Z, Y and Z, that had a cell phone in their hand, is wired differently. And we just have, in the news business, we have to recognize that that's part of the challenge of news delivery.
well, Julia Rain says it's so true. Had to do 3 book reports in the summer and math pages daily. David Youngblood says we eliminated civics years ago. That's why we are civically ignorant. And Power 96 brings up the Generation Z panel who spoke truth to power at the convention last week, the NNPA's convention. And Donnell Suggs is the managing editor of the Atlanta Voice. He says, long live the Black press. Donnell Suggs and the Atlanta Voice have been put in the presidential pool during his visit to Atlanta. So they will have access to the president.
That's
the
great.
campaign made sure of that. And the Voice, I mean, it's one of those papers where it can't be, shouldn't be, but it can't be ignored because of the impact that they do have. And I want to mention too, something that Power 96, 2 things he said. First, about when you're talking about Charlemagne, and I've noticed this, you can't help but notice, but Charlemagne is still stuck on the 94 crime bill, yet he's not stuck on executing the Central Park 5, now the exonerated 5. See, it's a thing here that you gotta pay attention to. Now, the last thing I'll let you ladies have at it, but the last thing, and Power 96 also brings this up, and I also noticed this and was really, really invigorated by it. He says that I am excited about just almost every Black-owned newspaper wrote an article about CNN excluding the Black press. I love it, he says. That needs to happen much more often.
We have to be better. I mean, like, I tell people all the time, people are afraid to talk about how we get treated as Black media in every facet of any type of news, any type of media. I'm like, I'm like, how can it get worse? We're already in the parking lot. What are we going to be like in the field? Like, why are you afraid of giving up your fold-up chair from the parking lot? I mean, like, what are you protecting? So it's important that, I don't care, people, people got their little situations, their battles. You did something to me back in 19, God knows what. But we need to put that to the side and be like, hey, you're in the parking lot, I'm in the parking lot. We're all sitting on the fold-up chairs. And guess what? What's the thing we have in common? We're all Black and we all work for Black-owned media. So why not band together and speak up and say, hey, our people, your guy didn't get a credential, your guy didn't get a credential. And the thing that Roland spoke about is, and I'm not a fan of that, is aggravated news, right? Why is there so much aggravated news
Aggregated.
Being reported in Black media? It's because A, we don't have the funds to send people out. Number two, when we do call, people don't respond back, or you get the kind of nonsense that you got. And it goes back to a bigger thing. You need to be in the room to ask your question. You need to be in the room to say things. Now, the clowns that are in this current picture, you know, that they want to talk about Black families. And listen, I'm gonna be clear: love who you want to love, date who you want to love. As long as you are consenting adults, I don't care. But how are you going to talk about the Black family and you don't have a Black family? How are you going to talk you care so much about Black children, but you vote against our interests? That's the stuff that you're talking about needed to be asked. You know, if you are a Black farmer and you're in that room and you say, hey, sir, what are you doing to help the plight of Black farmers? That's the stuff that you're talking about. I don't need to smoke a cigar with you and you come in. Also, even more importantly, why is it we only see your face every 4 years? We don't see your face every 2 years. We don't see your face when we're facing economic hardships, when companies are leaving our cities. Why are you here? If you care, why is it we never see you? And this isn't even your district. If you care about us, why are you not here with our Congress people?
Man, Lauren?
Yeah, I am not going to criticize Charlemagne for bringing up the 1994 Clinton crime bill, which was authored by Joe Biden, the president of the United States. It was so consequential. It was an omnibus crime bill, the biggest of any such type of bill to that point, the biggest in history. It impacted adversely the Black community, particularly Black males. So when we talk about these topics about why Black men are not in the home or they're not economically powerful, it's largely because when you get a felony, it's extremely hard to recover from that. So that crime bill had a lasting impact. It also went to Black leadership and what Black leadership was doing. And we have, in fact, a few people who are in Congress today who voted against and for that crime bill. And in fact, Kwesi Mfume is a member of Congress in the CBC today from Maryland, of course, returning. He was the chair of the CBC during the Clinton crime bill, and he made a deal that is fairly notorious. So these are the types of things that the Black media should be talking about around that. The fact that President Biden has never really come around to say that he regrets any piece of that legislation, I think is also problematic, because the Clintons actually did that to everyone's surprise.
But Lauren,
And
and
so
I'll let you, Lauren,
yeah.
I'll let you go on, but let me ask you this though, to that point though, and I get that, and as you mentioned, there were members of the Congressional Black Caucus who supported that. There were Black so-called faith leaders who pushed for it, and it's all on Biden's shoulders, and that's fine. You're right, but again, if you're gonna hold that against him, hasn't Trump been much more egregious in his racism?
We talk about that. Us talking about that doesn't mean we can't talk about what the Democratic nominee and the
No,
president
but
of the United
Charlemagne
States.
specifically says that's why he can't. He essentially will not support Joe Biden. He'd rather support Trump than Joe Biden.
Okay, well, that's on him. My point is, every time this comes up, it's a sensitive thing, I think, for Black media, because Black media, I think, sometimes makes the mistake of positioning itself in favor of everything the Democratic Party is doing. That crime bill was hugely consequential. And by the way, this Hillary Clinton talking point about how everybody Black supported it, you know, Congressman Bobby Scott, who's sitting in Congress right now, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, who's sitting in Congress right now, they voted very against it and were very vocally against it and told everybody what it was going to do, and they were right. So that should be reported as well. It shouldn't just be about what Joe Biden was doing, but you do have to recognize that we have two people in Democratic leadership, Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden, who are authors of that crime bill. I'm just saying that. That's just a fact.
Right. No, it's
I'm not saying we should dwell on it forever, but that's a fact. Okay.
Right.
So, and these people have not come back and said, wow, that was a mistake, which actually Bill Clinton did. So I'm not sure why they can't do that.
I mean,
so I'm just bringing that up.
You're right, but it's also political, right? I mean, this is the conundrum that we have as Black people. We know why we vote predominantly Democratic. It's civil rights. But when it comes on things such as crime, we are very conservative. During that time, and I'm not justifying that bill, but our communities were being literally, rooted out and uprooted because of the crack epidemic. It was destroying our whole areas, right? So people were desperate and they thought, hey, if we lock up everybody associated, adjacent, breathing this, then all of this will stop. And not realizing that it was a short-term solution, but didn't realize that a lot of these folks were going to spend all of their adult life in prison. And that means a lot of fathers, in some cases, mothers and fathers. This is why you have a whole generation of kids that were raised by their grandparents. And right. I think and I agree with you. It wasn't the solution. And we do have to hold everybody accountable. My number one issue with the Democrats is stop being nice. You're dealing with a person, a group of people that have absolutely no filter, don't care, call everybody a criminal and everything. I would love if Joe Biden got on that debate stage and said, here's why you should vote for me. One of us is a criminal. Yeah. And it ain't me. It's the guy sitting across. The guy sitting across had to call his parole officer and tell him where he's going to be.
The crime bill really isn't about the crime bill, just about the crime bill. The crime bill is about not repeating the same mistakes over and over again. And when you hire 100,000 cops and allocate $10 billion in prisons, okay, and then I'm glad you brought up the crack cocaine epidemic, because of course that's what touched off the crime bill, as we all know. We have an opioid epidemic, and as you can see, because those people are predominantly white, there's a completely different policy for that. When we did the crack thing, okay, well, let's put 100,000 cops out and let's build prisons and allocate $10 billion in prisons. And now when it's white folks dying of opioid, or dealing with any sort of opioid, now we're calling it opioid, we're not calling it, heroin. I mean, so these are the learning. I think one of the reasons why we should bring it up a little bit is you learn why that was a disaster and why your elected officials can't make that dumb decision again, whether they be white, Black, Democrat, or Republican. So that's my only thing with that.
But
and that's where the Black press. That's where the Black press does a really good job.
Right. But we also continue. You also see the dilemma here, because Power 96 says he was 19. And I've heard this from others. When the crime bill was passed, he says this, but here's the point. He says, we needed something. 424 homicides in New Orleans, 99% of those killed were Black. And he says, I don't support the Clintons, unless, of course, it's George Clinton. But but that was the position that many were in or felt at that time. We need something, Lauren. But what? So Biden comes up with him and Schumer with this crime bill.
Well, the Surgeon General just announced this week that gun homicides was a public health problem, right? Yep. Well, I'm sure gun homicides were a public health problem and drugs back in the 1990s when my dad
haven't figured it out.
Right, and when my dad was a cop. So the question is, in public policy, was the answer to allocate $10 billion to prisons and hire 100,000 cops? Was that the answer?
No,
that's the question.
No, the answer is no. And we know it wasn't just, I was just in Miami and just thinking about that. Miami was literally like the wild, wild west. People I remember being in Miami in the 90s and being like, well, people carjack in the Philadelphia area. They just I'd never seen cars on stilts, and you had to identify the car by the VIN number because it was just so burnt out and everything. It was looking more like the Middle East, and it was happening right in our backyard. So there was a desperation for people. And sadly, when there is a desperation, there isn't a well thought out plan. It's a reaction because people are like, listen, I'm tired. I can't go from point A to point B. I'm living in a war zone. So they came up with this. And again, not thinking long term how it was going to literally kill a community because a portion of the adults. And it's exactly what you said. It's not just with the opioid, it's also with the school shootings. We know it ain't us doing these school shootings. So what is the first response? mental health, right? We know that if it was someone Black, sadly, or someone brown, predominantly doing these school shootings, we would have gun reform law. We would have a stricter background check. We would have all of those things. Like, we knew we were in trouble after Sandy Hook when these kids were little. These kids just graduated the survivors high school, right? And people still are like not getting the effect that these young people are suffering and trying to process the fact that they're graduating high school and a whole population of their friends isn't there, not because they dropped out, because they were murdered. We saw Uvalde with parents, but because these parents are kids of immigrants or immigrants in their working class, you know, you see someone like Ted Cruz, and I wish somebody would have shoved him right over to the sidewalk when he's showing up there talking about, well, we need thoughts and prayers. Nobody wants your prayers, Ted. Like,
Well, so listen,
what we're
before we
doing.
go, I'm sorry, Katia, before we
That's
go, Lauren, let me ask you this question. What should we see at the debate tonight, and what should we see that we won't see?
What should we see that we won't see is probably a bunch of questions with regard to the Black community. We'll see probably the typical boilerplate types of questions that both of them can answer. I don't know exactly. I got to look to see what the format is. Obviously, with no audience, it's not a town hall style. So I guess the journalists are deciding what the questions are, which is always fascinating. I'm sure we'll over-index on foreign policy and under-index on things that really impact poor people and middle-class people in the United States, because that's what corporate media always does. They don't want to talk about poverty, and they don't want to talk about the things that disproportionately impact Black and brown communities. They'll talk about immigration, of course, but that's about it. So, I mean, we should see probably more of the topics that we would see if there was a Black journalist on stage. And, you know, I don't know. Well, I think this whole thing really is a test of age. You know, these two men are over 78 years old. And so a lot of this is going to be sitting around trying to figure out whether or not the president in particular, who is going to turn 82 at the end of this year, can hold up for 90 minutes. That's really the biggest thing, mental acuity. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
TJ writes in that we should see both candidates drop out, but they won't.
But, you know, they're having, because Trump doesn't know how to be quiet, right? They're having a button to mute their mic, which I think is really important because he will just ramble. But I wish Joe Biden does come out and say, hey, two of us are running for this office. One of us is a criminal. It ain't me. And one of us has to tell their parole officer anytime you go out of state, it's not me. And also, are you aware if you vote for him, he can't go to certain countries and visit those do business on behalf of this country because, once again, he's a convicted felon. And X, Y, and Z, the country that he said was going to build the wall, well, guess what? He can't go over there because he's a convicted felon.
They can build a wall to keep him out.
Exactly. How about the irony in that? The people he called rapists and murderers, that country can say now, well, we don't have to let you in. We don't want you here because you're a convicted felon. Isn't that ironic? So I really do hope that he's not nice, because the other guy isn't nice. He's horrible. Stop being nice.
There is, Katia and Lauren, real quick. What about this drug test thing they're asking for?
That's Trump. That's Trump's thing where he's putting this thing out. We should both, because he's trying to say that Joe Biden is not cognizant and everything. Well, I'm like, here's the other thing too, is if we're going to do that, well, then Don Jr. should be the first one, because no one is more bizarre than that whole entire clan than Don Jr.
Is not running for president.
And then I'm like, okay, then if we're going to start having drug tests, then we need to start having a lie detector test, because the other guy lies about everything, including the weather.
Strapped to a lie detector machine. Now that is what we should see, right, Lauren?
Exactly. But it's all, this is what Trump does. And I want us also to pay attention. This debate hasn't even happened because there are things being done to limit him being able to do what he does at these rallies. His team is already starting with the spin, saying that CNN is putting a fix in for
Fake
Biden to
news is
look
fiction.
better, and the list goes on and on. They're talking crap about Jake Tapper and Dana Bash already, that they're anti-Trump, that they're leftist. So pay attention. Why is it that you're so afraid, if you have nothing to lose, to debate and talk about why you're the better candidate?
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens tonight. I'll be watching. Lauren, I would imagine that you will be with Roland after the debate.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
all night
So I'll be
long.
watching
Yeah.
anxiously to get your feedback and see what you say, who wins, who loses. Does it really matter at this point before we go real quick? Got like 30 seconds. Does it matter in June who wins the debate and who loses?
Yeah, I think it matters. I think we have what is it, 150 days or 130 days? I forget what's left, but it matters because what happens in our world of technology is that those clips from this debate are going to roll for probably a good week. The discussion after. Now, the Supreme Court does have some major decisions probably coming down tomorrow, so that might
Are they going to release it or what?
yeah, they're obviously waiting for the debate because they don't want to impact, particularly on the Trump decision. So anyway, that's going to move the news along a little bit, but it matters because of the technology that we have that can repeat any gaffe that might happen or any moment that might happen. And so I do think it matters in that sense. The buildup is huge. And when you carry anything on all three cable networks, it's going to get a huge number of people watching. So all of that taken together, I do think it matters.
Yeah, and Trump's going to announce his VP pick as well.
Is he? It does say that. So it's
Yeah,
yeah. He's
might
not.
be.
That makes me wonder: is it Glenn Youngkin? Because he's got Glenn Youngkin on stage with him tomorrow.
Right.
Maybe not.
Vivek,
We'll
tell me
see.
all this campaigning Vivek has been doing, and he's not going to be the number two.
Vivek and Tim Scott.
Vivek would be an absolute disaster.
Terrible.
You want to talk about a reason for the black press to be at everything? If Vivek Ramaswamy is the pick, he to me is a white supremacist adjacent individual, and that would be a nightmare. There's two people that I think the black press should be particularly aware of: Tom Cotton and Vivek Ramaswamy. Everybody else.
What about JD Vance?
Who? JD Vance is problematic too, because of course he comes out with this book, Hillbilly the Elegy, and then goes into this complete conversion in another direction after the book comes out into another, like an alien coming taking off a mask. I don't know what his story is.
I know. Listen, I interviewed him for that movie.
Oh, really?
Like, yes, it's in my reel. And the other crazy thing is, well, Tom Cotton, I don't think, because then you're going to get into him, pretending to be an Army Ranger, right? The military community came out and said, no, sir. The Special Forces military community does not play about people cosplaying Special Forces. So I don't think, but by all means, please do try them out, because then you can really go through his record and that whole 9 yards.
Yeah,
well, we will see.
The
Michelle Madison says, I love it when these ladies are on. We love it when these ladies are on too. Last quick thought, Lauren, we got to wrap it up. Go ahead.
All I was going to say is when you have two presidents that are going to be in their 80s, it matters who the pick is. Like normally it wouldn't matter. But you're talking about a president that's going to be turning 80 in office should he get elected. The probability of the vice president mattering rises with that. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks for having me.
And that's a great point.
Thank you.
As always, Lauren Burke, of course, check out her platform, Black Virginia News. She's the CEO, the owner of Black Virginia News, and Katia Woods, Philadelphia Tribune, and more. It was always a privilege. Thanks for watching. Let it be known. We'll see you tomorrow, perhaps with some winners and losers of the debate. Thanks for watching.
Good night.
Thanks. Thank you.